The moment my stepmother slammed the folder on the table and claimed every piece of my father's estate for herself, I felt my world collapse. My name is Sarah, and I've spent months fighting for the truth hidden behind contracts, wills, and whispers in my own family. But the real question is, can justice ever heal a betrayal this deep? Tell me in the comments, what would you do if someone in your family tried to erase you from your father's legacy? My father had always been a strong man, the kind who could carry hay bales across the yard and fix a tractor engine with bare hands. But now, as I stood in the hallway of our family farmhouse, I could barely recognize him. His face looked thinner, his hands trembled as he tried to hold a glass of water, and his once steady voice had become a weak whisper. The change in him was frightening, but what made my chest tighten even more was the way Linda, my stepmother, hovered near his bed like a self-appointed guardian of everything that still belonged to him. I couldn't stop thinking about the day my father remarried. I was 20 then, still young and hopeful, telling myself that a second marriage might bring him comfort after years of loneliness. But even during the wedding toast, Linda had found a way to mention his responsibility to manage his wealth wisely. At the time, I had brushed it off as nerves or maybe ambition, but now those words echoed in my head. They had been a foreshadowing I hadn't wanted to hear. That morning, I went into the study to grab some files for my father's medical bills, only to realize something was wrong. The small steel safe he had always kept behind the bookshelf was no longer where I remembered it. When I finally spotted it tucked under the desk, I realized the lock had been changed. I tried the old combination, Dad's birthday, but it refused to open. Before I could think of what to do next, Linda walked in. Her heels clicked against the wooden floor, the sound sharp, deliberate. She held a tray of tea as if this were all perfectly normal. And her smile was that same sugar-coated expression I had come to distrust. "Looking for something, Sarah?" she asked, her tone flat. "The safe," I answered, forcing calm into my voice. "Why did you move it? Why won't it open?" She placed the tray down, looked at me as though I were a child meddling in grown-up matters, and said smoothly, "Your father asked me to reorganize. I've updated the combination for security. I'm just trying to take care of him." Something twisted in my stomach. My father, who had always insisted on handling his own papers, couldn't possibly have asked her to change that lock. But when I glanced at the bedroom doorway, I saw him lying weakly on the bed, eyes closed, too tired to intervene. I clenched my fists at my sides. I need access to those documents. I'm the one paying the medical bills. Linda's smile sharpened. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small brass key that must have belonged to the safe's override lock, and dangled it in front of me before sliding it back into her palm. "From now on," she said, her voice carrying a finality that chilled me, "everything goes through me. If you need something, you'll ask. I'll decide what's necessary." The room seemed to shrink around me. My heart pounded as I realized what had just happened. Every paper, every deed, every record of my father's land and savings was now in her control. It wasn't just the safe that had been locked, it was my father's legacy. I looked at my father again, hoping for protest, some sign of resistance. Instead, he gave a small nod, as if he were too exhausted to fight, or worse, too resigned to care. His acceptance felt like a betrayal, not of me, but of himself. I forced myself not to break down. If Linda wanted me to react, to look powerless, I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. I pressed my lips together, steadied my breath, and said nothing. But in my mind, a quiet promise formed. I would not let her steal everything under the guise of care. Linda turned on her heel, and walked out, clutching the key so tightly her knuckles whitened. The echo of her footsteps lingered in the hallway long after she disappeared. I stayed there a moment, staring at the safe, its new lock glinting in the lamplight. I knew then this was no longer just about family harmony. It was about survival, about truth, about protecting the name and the years of sacrifice my father had poured into this farm. When I finally turned back toward the bedroom, Dad's tired eyes met mine. He gave a faint, almost apologetic smile, but His silence told me everything. He wasn't going to fight Linda. Not now. And as I stood there, the reality pressed in on me. I would have to be the one to do it. By the time the roast was carved, the dining room had settled into the heavy quiet of a courtroom waiting on a verdict. Crystal clicked against china. The chandelier gave a faint electrical hum. I counted breaths and kept my shoulders square. If Linda wanted to turn dinner into a hearing, I would sit as the calmest person in the room. I let conversation drift over me, the weather, a tractor part back-ordered, a neighbor's fence that needed mending, until Linda aimed her smile down the length of the table. "Sarah," she said, as if we were already mid-discussion, "I'm glad you're here. You've been busy in your father's study, haven't you?" I dabbed my mouth with my napkin. "I've been paying his bills." "Bills," she echoed, pleasant. "And safes. And combinations." A soft ripple of amusement ran through the relatives nearest her. "It's just that some people might get the wrong idea." "The wrong idea about what?" I kept my tone mild. "That you're focused on money when Michael needs peace." She tilted her head, jewels catching the light. "Money can be a distraction. Family must come first." My fork rested on porcelain. "Money pays for peace," I said. "It keeps nurses coming and the lights on. Numbers are how we do that." "Numbers are cold," she replied gently. "They don't hold a hand at night." Across from me, Mom folded her napkin more tightly, eyes lowered. David shifted, elbow brushing his water glass. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at her. He looked at the linen like it might offer instructions. I took a slow sip of water. "I'm not the one who changed the safe." Linda didn't blink. "Security is love in practice. Michael asked me to simplify." "He finds the noise exhausting." There it was again. Noise. As if my questions were static on an otherwise clear line. "What did he ask you to simplify?" I asked. "Everything that wears him out," she said, brightening. Voice meant for witnesses. "Payments, property decisions, and the fund. It needs a steady steward." She let the word steward breathe. Someone at the far end murmured agreement. I glanced at Mom. She looked small in her chair, like a referee too tired to blow the whistle. Linda turned a page in her script. "We've all seen how burdened Sarah gets by spreadsheets. Might be kinder to relieve her? We should consider who has the temperament to carry this forward without making a production of it." My heartbeat thumped once, hard. "A production of it," I repeated lightly. "Like changing locks without telling anyone." "Like preventing panic," she corrected. "We handle things so Michael can rest." She reached and patted the table, a mimicry of comfort. "He has been thinking. He wants to place the fund where it will grow, with someone worthy, someone who won't fixate." Aunt Martha coughed, a dry little bark. A cousin cleared his throat. The chandelier hummed. I tried to picture numbers, neat columns, a ledger holding steady in a stiff wind. "Worthy," I said. "That's a big word. How are we defining it?" Linda's smile suggested concern for my education. "Steadiness, discretion, the ability to keep family matters dignified. I think we all know who fits that bill." Her gaze slid, not to me, to David. He flinched as if tapped. His hand curled on the tablecloth, then smoothed it. He finally looked at me. A quick, almost guilty glance. I held his eyes for a heartbeat and gave him nothing. No plea, no accusation. He looked away first. Linda lifted her wine. "To keeping Michael's legacy intact," she said. Glasses rose. I didn't raise mine. "If there's going to be any transfer," I said calmly, "it should be done in the open, with counsel present." And with Dad lucid enough to confirm. "Of course," Linda said, delighted by my reasonableness. "Transparency is our priority." "What day?" I asked. The slickness on her face faltered, then smoothed. Soon, when he's having a good morning. Then schedule it, I said. I'll bring the records that show what the fund has actually paid for these past months. It might help the worthy person understand what they're inheriting. A few relatives pretended to adjust silverware. Mom's eyes lifted, warm with something like warning. Not here, not like this. Linda set down her glass and folded her hands. Sarah, she said, soft and pitying, I wish you wouldn't make this harder than it has to be. Your father is ill. He wants quiet. He told me himself. He's ready to move the fund to someone he can rely on without debate. She paused, letting the room lean toward her. He intends to transfer stewardship to the person most capable, the person who won't turn love into ledgers. The sentence hung there, glinting. I did not move. Then we all agree, I said. An attorney should draft the instrument. We'll need Michael's signature, witnessed, with medical confirmation that he's competent. Linda's eyebrows lifted. You're welcome to bring whatever paperwork makes you comfortable, she said. But this is Michael's choice. He doesn't want fighting. He wants to know his legacy will be guarded by someone who understands restraint. Again, that look toward David. Quick as a signal flag. He wet his lips. We all want what's best for Dad, he said finally. His voice was careful, balanced between two cliffs. Best means lawful, I said, and fair. Best means peace, Linda said, sweet as syrup. Peace comes when someone stops stirring the pot. I smiled with my mouth, not my eyes. I'll stop stirring when the recipe isn't being changed behind a closed door. A tiny hiss of breath came from the aunt to Linda's left. Linda gathered the room with her gaze and smoothed it again. Let's not spoil dessert, she said brightly. We can finalize details this week. Michael is decisive when he feels supported. The plates were cleared. Pie appeared. People made polite noises about cinnamon and crust. I ate 2 bites and tasted nothing. My mind counted backwards from 100 by 7s, the way I tell nervous clients to steady their pulse. 93, 86, 79. When I looked up, David was staring at his fork as if it had asked him a question he couldn't answer. Linda touched his sleeve, casual as a breeze. You'll help your father with the paperwork, won't you? She asked him, voice pitched to carry. He nodded, tiny, reluctant, but he nodded. Mom's spoon clinked against porcelain. She looked at me, quick and aching, then looked down again. The room softened at the edges, diffused by lamplight and the smell of nutmeg. Somewhere, a floorboard creaked. I set my fork aside, folded my napkin, and lifted my chin. When the papers are drawn, I said, I'll be there. Linda's smile returned, immaculate. Naturally, she said, we wouldn't want any misunderstanding. People began to stand, scraping chairs, complimenting the pie. I moved slower than the rest, as if speed might make me stumble. At the doorway, I paused and glanced back. David was still seated, palm flat on the table, eyes lowered. He lifted them to mine as if pulled. For a heartbeat, there was my brother, the one who used to fix my bike chain and steal extra rolls for me when Dad wasn't looking. Then Linda said his name, just once, gentle as a leash, and he turned toward her voice. He didn't come with me. Linda chose the living room the way a stage director chooses a set. Angles, light, who sat where. She opened the curtains so winter sun fell squarely across the coffee table, then positioned the armchair so my father would face the room like a figurehead, blankets tucked around his knees. The legal pad and a thick stack of papers lay in the center, squared to the table's edge. I could smell furniture polish and the faintest trace of antiseptic from the home nurse's last visit. Thank you for coming on short notice, Linda said, voice honeyed. Michael's had a clear morning. It's a good time to finalize things. Bell, the attorney, was already there, mid-50s, careful suit, the kind of man who takes notes even when no one is speaking. He nodded to me with a grave politeness that made my stomach tighten. David hovered by the window, hands in his pockets, eyes on the pasture as if it might give him permission to leave. I took the chair closest to Dad. Up close, the changes in him were a map I didn't want to read. Paper-thin skin, a gray pallor that hadn't been there in October, a tremor he tried to hide by pressing his palms into the blanket. He smiled at me, a small, exhausted curve. "Morning, kiddo," he murmured. "Morning, Dad." I touched his wrist. It was cool. Linda cleared her throat and slid the top page from the stack. "Michael and I have talked," she began, "and given everything he's dealing with, he wants simplicity. Belle has prepared a document that will relieve him of logistical burdens and put decisions in steadier hands." She said steadier hands without looking at me, which is how I knew she meant me. Belle adjusted his glasses. "This is a durable power of attorney," he said. "It appoints an agent to act on Michael's behalf in financial matters, managing accounts, paying bills, signing contracts, that sort of thing." "An agent," I repeated. My voice sounded even to my own ears, which I took as a victory. Linda's smile widened. "It's common at times like these. Compassionate, really." She tilted the title page so we could all see the bold letters, "Durable Power of Attorney." I scanned the first paragraph and felt heat crawl up my neck. It wasn't just paying bills. It was authority to sell, to transfer, to manage, redeploy, and dispose of assets as deemed beneficial by the agent. "Who's the agent?" I asked, though I already knew. Linda's pen tapped the blank line near the bottom. "Michael will name the steward he trusts." "Steward," I said, as if tasting a word I didn't remember ordering. David shifted, the heel of his shoe catching on a groove in the floor. He didn't speak. Linda slid a second sheet off the stack. "There's also a companion instruction regarding the family fund, to consolidate and place under a single signature for efficiency." "For control," I said quietly. Belle looked up at that. He folded his hands in his lap, lawyerly neutral. "It's important that everyone understands the scope and implications. A durable power of attorney remains in effect even if the principal's capacity declines." Linda nodded quickly. "Which is why we should do it while Michael is strong." My father swallowed. The sound was loud in the quiet room. "I'm tired," he said, not as a complaint, just a fact anyone could verify. I leaned forward. "Dad, we can pay the bills without this. If you want help, we can split tasks. You don't have to hand everything away." Linda's tone turned soft with reprimand. "No one is handing anything away. We're streamlining. It's what he wants." "Does he?" I asked, looking at Belle, not at her. "Has he had an independent assessment of capacity? Has anyone explained to him that this agent could sell property without notice?" Belle's eyes moved to my father. "Michael, I need to confirm. Do you understand that a power of attorney gives your agent broad authority? That includes the ability to transfer assets." He nodded. "Once. Slow." Linda explained. "Linda is not your counsel," I said before I could stop myself. Belle didn't flinch. "I am. But I can only advise if I'm asked questions." "Then here's one," I said, my voice steady by effort. "If the agent is not a blood relative and this power is combined with a consolidation directive, does that effectively remove your children from all meaningful decisions?" Linda exhaled a thin laugh. "Oh, Sarah, no one is removing anyone. We're trying to protect your father." I held up the second page. "This companion instruction. It names an agent who can act without consultation. It's a blank check." David finally spoke, quiet. "Sarah, maybe we should just what?" I asked, still looking at Belle. "Watch it happen and say we were dignified about it?" Belle set his pen down. His voice, when it came, was careful but unambiguous. "If executed as drafted, this package would place full financial authority in the agent. There is no co-agent provision. There is no requirement of notice to heirs or co-signatures on transfers. And," he looked at me, "by practice, institutions often follow the agent's instructions without further inquiry. In effect, yes, it would sideline direct descendants from decision-making." The room changed shape. The corners came forward. The center fell away. I heard a clock somewhere in the house, ticking like a metronome for a song I didn't know. Linda's cheeks flushed faintly, then cooled. "Michael trusts me," she said. "He needs someone who won't complicate things." We've all seen how Sarah reacts. My father blinked slowly. "I saw the man who taught me to measure twice and cut once, the one who had made me redo a fence post because half right doesn't hold." I swallowed hard. "Dad," I said, keeping my voice low. If you want an agent, make it a co-agent structure, 2 signatures required, or name Belle as a neutral, with me and David to co-sign on major transfers. Don't sign away your own checks and balances. Linda's smile thinned like ice on a puddle. That defeats the purpose of simplicity. Simplicity should never mean surrender, I said. Silence stretched. Even the clock seemed to hold its breath. Out the window, a herd dog loped along the fence, tail flicking, not hurrying anywhere. Belle shuffled his papers, as if to give the room somewhere to look. Michael, you're entitled to choose any structure you like. We can add co-agent language. We can limit the scope to medical payments only. Or, he paused, we can refrain from executing anything today. Linda's head snapped toward him. He's lucid now, she said. Waiting will only make it harder. Harder for whom? I asked. Enough, she said, still soft. But the softness had splinters. She slid the pen toward my father. Michael, sign where I've marked. This is what we discussed. His hand hovered. The tremor was more visible now, a small shaking he tried to press into the paper. He looked at me, then at David, then at the tidy line waiting for his name. Dad, I said, and felt every word in my throat. At least let Belle add the co-agent clause. That's all I'm asking. Belle's mouth opened, then closed. He looked from me to Linda to my father, the way a referee looks at a ball still spinning on the rim. My father's fingers closed around the pen. The sound of it lifting off the table was tiny, obscene, a needle on a record. He lowered the tip toward the signature line. His hand shook, the pen scraped, and still it drifted down. The key was small, brass, and worn smooth by decades of use. Aunt Karen pressed it into my palm without ceremony, her expression steady but her eyes saying everything she didn't dare voice aloud. Old storage chest in the loft, she whispered, then glanced toward the hallway, where Linda's shadow might appear at any moment. The weight of the key burned against my skin long after she left. That night, I waited until the house was quiet. The farmhouse groaned the way old wood does, each creak sounding like a verdict. I carried a flashlight and the key, my heart thudding with a rhythm that wasn't entirely fear, more like the charge before a storm. The attic ladder groaned as I pulled it down, dust drifting in slow spirals. The loft smelled of cedar and mothballs, the kind of place where memories are packed away and left to rot. Stacks of boxes leaned like crooked gravestones, each labeled in my father's script. Receipts, tax 1998, livestock. I knelt before the iron-banded trunk in the far corner, brushed away cobwebs, and slid the key into its lock. It turned with a stiff click, louder than I expected. Inside was a chaos of papers, folded envelopes yellowed with age, ledgers scribbled with notes, and loose sheaves that looked like drafts of contracts. I pulled one out and traced my father's handwriting, neat, confident, unbending. One document bore the title, Property Transfer Agreement, but the signature lines were blank, as if he had hesitated or been interrupted. Another was a stack of receipts. Land taxes, water rights, livestock feed, all meticulously tracked. My chest tightened with recognition. These weren't the records Linda paraded in front of us. These were originals, untouched by her hand. I kept digging until I found a slim, leather-bound ledger. Inside, my father had recorded not just numbers but fragments of thoughts. Notations about weather, crop yields, worries about drought. The writing grew shakier in later years, but the intent was clear. He wanted a record that no one could twist. And then, folded between 2 blank pages, a single loose sheet. The ink was darker, fresher than the rest, written in hurried strokes. Do not let Linda touch the land fund. I froze. My breath caught so hard it hurt. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was confirmation. He knew. He saw through her charm and careful manipulation, and he had left a breadcrumb trail for someone willing to look. For me. I sat on the dusty floor, staring at the page, as if the words might vanish if I blinked. Rage, relief, sorrow, they tangled together until I couldn't tell one from the other. I remembered her smug voice at dinner, the way she dangled worthy airs like a baited hook, and my father's exhausted nod, as if resistance were too heavy for him. "Not if I can help it," I whispered, my voice swallowed by the rafters. I folded the sheet carefully and slid it into my coat pocket. Then, after a second thought, I tucked several of the contracts and the ledger pages into a folder I'd brought. My hands trembled. But not with fear anymore. This was evidence, raw, undeniable proof that she was maneuvering against my father's will. The attic light flickered, and for one wild second I imagined Linda standing below, listening. But when I crept back down, the hall was still. The only sound was the slow tick of the clock in the kitchen, as steady as a heartbeat. I walked to my room, clutching the folder under my arm like a shield. In the mirror, I saw my face smeared with dust, and something fiercer in my eyes than I had ever seen before. I slipped the folder deep into my bag and zipped it shut. She won't touch this. She can't. Because for the first time since this nightmare began, I held something stronger than suspicion. I held my father's truth, and I was not going to let it go. Belle's office was the kind of place where pens sat in straight lines and time moved in quarter hours. Framed diplomas lined the paneled wall, and a brass lamp cast a neat pool of light over a leather blotter. The air smelled faintly of paper and coffee, a civilized scent that made the last week feel like a bad dream I might still wake from. I chose the chair that faced the door, my back to the bookshelves, so I could see everyone enter. Control what you can. Michael arrived first, moving slowly, Linda steering him with a hand under his elbow as if she were the nurse and the wife and the guardian of a fragile artifact. David trailed them, eyes shadowed, suit jacket a size too large, as if he had tried on responsibility and found it didn't quite fit. Belle stood when we came in, shook hands one by one, then gestured to the seats. His expression was the same professional calm he'd worn in our living room, but his eyes sharpened when they met mine, as if he were rechecking a calculation he hadn't liked the first time. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Given Michael's condition, I want to make sure we proceed with clarity." Linda crossed her legs and rested a folder on her knee, the cover pristine. "Clarity is exactly what we're here for," she said. "Michael needs decisions made without friction." "I don't mind friction if it keeps the wheels on," I said. Belle cleared his throat, a diplomatic cough. "Let's begin with the question of the family fund and Michael's estate plan. As you know, there's a will on file from 5 years ago. There are also amendments, codicils, that can update beneficiaries or instructions." "Codicils?" David repeated, as if the word had appeared in a foreign film he'd wandered into by mistake. Linda's smile thinned. "We've seen the will," she said. "It favors the children equally. Michael and I have discussed consolidating the fund for better management under a single steward." She turned to Belle. "We're ready to execute the power of attorney and the consolidation instruction we reviewed." Belle folded his hands. "We can discuss those. But first, there is an undisclosed codicil Michael executed last year that I need to bring into the conversation." The word undisclosed snapped the room taut. Linda's fingers tightened on her folder. "Undisclosed to whom?" she asked. "To anyone not present when it was signed," Belle said, tone neutral. "Michael, you executed a codicil in my office adding specific oversight language for the farm parcels and the family fund. Do you remember?" My father blinked, looking inward for the answer. "I think so," he said slowly. Linda's laugh was small and brittle. "If it exists, we should see it." "You will," Belle said. He slid a sealed envelope from his drawer, broke the wax with a letter opener, and withdrew a single page. He read without performing, eyes down, voice steady. "This codicil maintains equal inheritance for Sarah and David, adds a 2-signature requirement on any sale or transfer of the farm parcels, and establishes that the family fund cannot be moved without written consent of both children or a court-appointed fiduciary." Heat crawled up my arms, a strange mix of relief and grief. Dad at some point had understood. He had tried to protect us from the very danger, now sitting in a cream blouse and pearls. Linda's chin lifted. "Michael didn't want complication," she said. We agreed simplicity was best. Belle set the codicil on the desk, palm flat atop it, like a notary seal. Simplicity and safeguards are not mutually exclusive. David exhaled, the sound half sigh, half beginning of a word. He looked at me as if he might apologize for something he hadn't done yet. Linda shifted tactics. Even if there's a codicil, she said, a durable power of attorney would allow the agent to act efficiently. Within limits, Belle replied. A power cannot override the two-signature requirement the codicil imposes on parcel transfers and fund relocation. The codicil governs. I watched the smallest crack pass over Linda's face, the hairline fracture you only see if you're staring when porcelain cools too fast. She covered it with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Michael doesn't need his children second-guessing him, she said sweetly. He needs strength. He needs a steward. Dad needs transparency, I said, and rest. Both come easier when no one is holding the only key. Belle turned to my father. Michael, we can update your plan to reflect your current wishes, but you must understand what each instrument does. And you must be comfortable. His tone left a space for courage to enter. My father's thumb rubbed the edge of the armrest, a small motion I recognized from childhood when he was turning a problem in his hands. I don't want fighting, he murmured. Neither do I said, feeling every word. That's why we stick to documents you signed when you were strong. The codicil is you, Dad. It's your voice on paper. Linda's folder snapped open. This is absurd, she said. Sarah is making this about herself. She's been rummaging through files, stirring panic, undermining Michael's peace. She looked at Belle. We proceed with the power of attorney. Now. Belle didn't move. Before I advise any signing, I need to address another point. He glanced at me, and I knew he was about to say the thing that would either save us or blow us apart. There have been concerns raised about unauthorized access to the safe and about documents not aligning with Michael's earlier records. I will need to reconcile the sets. Linda's smile returned, brittle as sugar glass. Reconcile what exactly? Sarah has nothing but guesses. A sound in the hallway, heels on tile, and then Aunt Karen stepped in, coat draped over her arm, face composed in a way that made me want to stand taller. Belle started to rise, then sat again at her small wave. I asked Karen to join, I said. She has context. Karen took the chair beside me and rested a hand on the table, fingers relaxed. I've watched Michael keep records for 30 years, she said. He wrote down everything. Rainfall, calf births, the price of diesel. He believed in paper because paper doesn't forget. Her voice softened. Last week, Sarah found a note in his hand. Do not let Linda touch the land fund. Linda's head snapped. She found it, she repeated, acid behind the sweetness. Convenient. Karen didn't blink. I was the one who gave Sarah the key to the old storage chest. I saw the ledger with my own eyes. Silence pressed into the room. Belle folded the codicil and slid it into a clear sleeve. His tone when he spoke was a shade firmer. Given the codicil and Karen's statement, my recommendation is that we do not sign the power of attorney today. Instead, we inventory the records, confirm Michael's capacity, and schedule a witnessed meeting to address any changes with both heirs present. Linda turned to me, and the civility dropped like a curtain. You keep saying numbers tell the truth, she said. Fine. She leaned in, eyes bright with challenge. What proof do you actually have, Sarah? Not stories, not sentiment, proof. I met her stare and felt the folder in my bag like a second heartbeat. Pages that smelled of cedar and dust. My father's handwriting, the ledger that didn't forget. Enough, Belle said quietly, but Linda didn't look away. Show us, she whispered, if you can. Karen chose the cafe on the corner because no one there asked questions unless you were light on cream pie. The bell over the door chimed as we stepped in, and the smell of burnt coffee and cinnamon sugar washed the cold off our coats. A waitress with a pencil behind her ear waved us toward a booth by the window. Outside, Main Street was January gray. Inside, the vinyl seats sighed when we slid in. Karen didn't bother with small talk. She wrapped both hands around her mug and said low, "I've seen Linda push your father to sign things he didn't understand." Her eyes flicked to mine. Twice. Once at the kitchen table last spring, she called it an insurance form, and once in Belle's waiting room, some update she slipped on top of magazines. Michael signed because he hates to cause a fuss. Heat climbed my throat. "And you didn't stop her." "I tried." Karen's mouth tightened. She smiled at me like I was a sweet old aunt who'd forgotten her place. Said Michael asked for her help. It was over in seconds. I stared into my coffee until the surface stilled. Belle's codicil protects the land and the fund. If Linda's angling around it, she needs leverage, something that looks legitimate when a bank or a clerk glances at it. We have to find anyone who heard her plan. Karen slid a folded sheet across the table, names in her tidy print. "Your father's circle," she said. "People he trusted, church, feed store, the co-op, the mechanic. If Linda was shopping a story about streamlining, one of them heard it." We split the list. I took the mechanic, Earl Whitman, because Dad used to send me there to pick up parts when I was 16. Karen took the co-op manager and the church treasurer. We promised to meet back with anything that sounded like more than gossip. Earl's garage was 2 blocks down, all corrugated metal and wind chimes from his wife's craft stand. He was under a Ford when I walked in, boots sticking out, radio tuned to static between country stations. "Be with you in a blink," he hollered, voice echoing off wrenches. He rolled out, wiped his hands on a rag, and squinted. "Well, if it isn't Michael's girl. Sarah, right?" "Right." I smiled because that's how you open doors in a small town. "Got a minute?" "For your dad?" "Always." He gestured toward the office, a glass box smelling of grease and coffee. We sat. He poured from a pot that looked older than me. "I need to ask about something you might have heard," I said. "Linda's been talking about moving the land fund, sang 10 qui jat, putting the deeds and the money under a single signature. You hear anything like that?" Earl leaned back, chair creaking. "Couple months ago," he said slowly, "she brought the Silverado in for a rattle that didn't exist. Stuck around to chat. Told me Michael's paperwork was a mess. Asked if I knew anyone who could notarize something on short notice." He scratched his chin. "Said she wanted all the farm business in one hand so things wouldn't get sloppy." Her words? My pulse ticked faster. Did she say whose hand? Earl's smile was brief and humorless. "Didn't need to. She had that look like a dog with a bone." I pressed. "Did Dad ever bring contracts through here? Anything about the parcels or the fund?" Earl's gaze shifted through memory. "Your daddy kept originals in the damnedest places. Not the safe, even. Said if thieves come, the first thing they take is a safe." He huffed a laugh. "He carried the important stuff on him. In that old leather wallet looked like it'd been run over twice. Said the inside flap had a tear just right to hide a single folded sheet." My breath snagged. "A torn wallet." "Yup, I teased him once," Earl said, eyes softening. "Told him a man who owns 200 acres shouldn't carry a wallet held together by hope. He tapped it and said, 'Hope and a good fold are all you need.'" Earl's smile faded. He showed me a corner of a form tucked under the lining. Said it was an agreement he wasn't ready to sign, but wanted near him to think on. Told me, "If anything happens, Sarah knows where to look." The room tilted. I remembered Dad's hand patting his back pocket, the way he always did before leaving the house. The unthinking inventory. Keys, knife, wallet. I remembered Linda's gentle insistence on laundering his jeans herself when he started treatment. "It's easier for me, Michael," she'd sing-song, already reaching for the hamper. "Earl," I said carefully, "do you remember when you last saw him carrying that wallet?" Late summer, he said, before the treatment started in earnest. Few weeks after that, Linda paid me cash for a break job and said Michael was using a money clip now. Said the wallet was cracked to pieces and she'd taken care of it. Funny thing, he always liked the crack. I could feel the booth at the cafe under my palm again, the ledger's cedar smell, my father's rushed line, "Do not let Linda touch the land fund." The note had been in the loft, not the wallet, but the contract, the unfinished one. He might have tucked it under that torn flap like a man hiding a fuse until he knew which bridge to save. "Thank you," I said, standing too fast, the room a fraction behind me. "You've helped more than you know." Earl followed me to the door, concern creasing his forehead. "You tell Michael I'm praying for him," he said, "and Sarah, watch your back." That woman smiles with her teeth. Back at the cafe, Karen was already in the booth, hands around a fresh mug. She read my face before I spoke. "You found something." I slid in, breath still catching. Witness corroboration, she asked Earl for a notary, pitched one-hand management, and Dad, my voice thinned. He kept a contract under the torn flap of his wallet, said if anything happened, I'd know where to look. Karen's eyes flared, then narrowed with clear purpose. "Where's the wallet now?" I didn't have to answer. The answer was a picture in my head. Linda in the laundry room, folding Dad's jeans with dutiful care. Linda in their bedroom, a tidy tray on the dresser. Linda, the new lock on the safe gleaming. Linda, the brass key disappearing into her pocket. I saw her open the top drawer of the nightstand with that proprietary confidence. I heard the small, smug click of leather against wood. On her side of the bed, I said, heat rising. She told Earl she'd taken care of it. If Dad tucked the original into the lining, she has it. Karen set her cup down so gently it made no sound. "Then we have to get it before she uses it." I nodded, heart tripping into a faster gear. The codicil gives us legal teeth. The ledger gives us intent. But the contract in that wallet, that's the match. If she waives a signed version, even forged, we can tear it apart with chain of custody and expert review. If we find the unfinished original first, we end the story before it's told. Outside the window, a gust shook last year's leaves from the courthouse oak. The bell over the cafe door chimed. Someone laughed near the register. A child clacked crayons on a tabletop in a rhythm that sounded like urgency. Karen reached across and squeezed my hand. "You're your father's girl," she said, eyes bright. "Measure twice, cut once." I swallowed and stood, the decision already made. "I'm going to the house." "Careful," she said. "Careful," I echoed, though a wildness had already slipped the leash inside me. I thanked the waitress, left cash under the salt shaker, and pulled on my coat. On the walk back, I jammed my hands into my pockets and felt the folded page from the loft. My father's warning, like a live wire, against my fingers. The picture in my head sharpened. The bedroom, the nightstand, the drawer that stuck a little before it slid. The old leather edge peeking out from beneath neat stacks of nothing. The torn wallet wasn't a relic anymore. It was a vault. And Linda had the key. The clinic was quiet at noon, the kind of lull where the copier finally stops nagging and the phones forget to ring. I was reconciling insurance remittances, red pen parked behind my ear, when the receptionist buzzed. "Visitor for you, Sarah. Says it's quick." I stepped into the hallway, and there she was, Linda, in a cream coat that didn't belong in flu season, smile pressed on like a label. "I was nearby," she said, gliding past me into my small bookkeeping office before I could object. She surveyed the spreadsheets taped to my corkboard, the metal filing cabinet, the two succulents losing an honest fight with winter. Diligent as ever. "What do you need?" I asked, keeping my voice level. She held up a tiny black USB drive between thumb and forefinger, as if pinching a tick. "You asked for proof," she said lightly. "Here's something that might clarify a few things." She placed the drive on my keyboard, then checked her phone. I'll let you get back to your numbers. The smile warmed falsely. See you soon, dear. By the time my brain unhooked from the word proof, she was already down the hall, heels clicking like a metronome set to smug. Every instinct in me screamed trap, but I also heard Karen's voice. Measure twice. I pulled out my personal notebook and wrote the time, date, and that Linda delivered a drive in person. Then I took out my phone and snapped photos. USB on the keyboard, my office clock in the frame, the clinic hallway security camera above the door. Chain of custody begins with memory, but it survives on paper. I booted the clinic's spare workstation, air-gapped from medical records, and disabled auto-run. When the desktop loaded, I launched a portable file viewer from my own thumb drive, dated the session in my notes again, and only then inserted Linda's USB. A single folder appeared, for Sarah. Inside it, one audio file. Michael Legacy, discussion. Wave. The name set my teeth on edge. I hovered a second longer, started screen recording, and double-checked the system clock in the corner. Then I clicked play. My voice came out of the speakers. If we push it through while he's groggy, we can move the fun before anyone notices. David's easy. Belle can be handled. I froze. The voice was mine, the cadence, the soft rasp when I'm tired, but the words were not. The file ran 7 minutes, stitched from atoms of me into something that could ruin an air in under 10. I listened to the whole thing, jaw locked, and when it ended, my screen flashed. File error. Cannot locate resource. The directory blinked, the WAV vanished. In its place, the folder emptied like a stage after the lights go out. Auto-purge. She'd baited the hook perfectly. A file that plays once, then scrubs itself, leaving nothing but an accusation. I pictured Linda in my office door, the way she'd lingered near the hall camera, the cream sleeve brushing my chair. You asked for proof. I exhaled, slow. Okay, I said to no one, and began to move. First, I saved the screen recording to my own encrypted drive. Then I pulled up the system's event viewer and snapped photos of the USB mount time, the file path, the deletion event codes. I captured the hash values the recorder had generated for its output. I photographed the computer's serial number plate. I printed the office's camera log checkout sheet and signed it. 12:09 p.m. Visitor Linda Miller entered accounting. 12:13 p.m. Exited. I asked the receptionist to initial it. She raised an eyebrow, then obliged. It's a small town, and she's seen enough divorce decrees to know when to witness. By the time my palms stopped sweating, I had a tidy envelope. Screenshots, timestamps, a sheet with my chain of custody steps in bullet points, each one dated and signed. I sent a copy of the screen recording to a cloud folder Karen could access, then wrote Belle a short email from my personal account. Received a device from Linda. One play audio impersonation. Auto erased. Preserving logs. Will bring materials. I didn't hit send yet. I wanted to add the hallway camera footage once the manager pulled it. When I finally sat down, the room felt too small. I replayed the words that weren't mine, the places where my synthetic self laughed, the ugly precision of it. Someone had fed a machine my voice and typed their own malice. Linda didn't just want my father's fund. She wanted the stain to live on me. A knock on the doorframe. I looked up, ready to fight, but it was only the receptionist with a cream envelope. Delivery, she said, vague smile, from the Miller's place. Inside was a vellum card embossed with holly. Christmas Eve at the farmhouse, 7 p.m. Family only. I could see Linda's hand in the script, a flourish on the M in Michael that looked like ownership. I held the invitation, letting the cardstock bite my fingers. Of course she wanted me there. She wanted an audience. She wanted to play the file in a room full of cousins and ornaments and my father's frail silence. And then she wanted to watch me drown in it. I tucked the card under my blotter and wrote the time in my notebook. Then I read over the steps I'd taken and added one more line. Obtain entrance logs and camera clips from clinic. Secure in duplicate. I pictured Earl's warning, that woman smiles with her teeth, and thought of the wallet under Linda's care, the torn flap where a contract might sleep, waiting for heat to wake it. I packed the USB into a zippered pouch, labeled it with the date, and sealed the envelope with tape. My hands had finally stopped shaking. Outside, the winter light was the color of old coins. In 2 days, I'd be sitting in my father's living room beneath a spruce hung with glass deer, and Linda would be ready to perform. Let her, I thought, and closed the envelope. Let her press play. I would bring the clock, the camera, the ledger that doesn't forget, and when she tried to burn me with my own voice, I'd show the room where the spark really came from. The farmhouse smelled of cinnamon and pine, but the warmth that should have come with Christmas Eve never reached me. Candles flickered along the banquet table. Laughter rose and fell in practiced crescendos, yet all I heard was the pounding in my ears. Linda moved gracefully among the guests, her sequined dress catching the light like broken glass, her smile too bright, too rehearsed. I knew what she was going to do. I kept my posture straight at the long table beside David, who pretended to focus on carving the ham. Karen's hand found mine under the table, a squeeze of steel. Bell, the family lawyer, sat near the end, already uneasy, his briefcase propped like a silent referee. Mom, quiet as ever, stared at her plate. And Dad, frail, bundled in a sweater, gaze dim but still carrying weight, watched it all with the wariness of a man cornered. Linda cleared her throat delicately, tapping her wine glass. "Before we exchange gifts," she said sweetly, "I thought the family deserved to hear something important." From her clutch, she drew a tiny USB and slid it into the laptop connected to the speaker system. My chest tightened. The very same drive that had auto-purged in my office. She smiled as if unwrapping a gift. The speakers crackled. Then my voice filled the room. "We just need to keep Father distracted. Once the paperwork is signed, the land is ours." Gasps fluttered across the table. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Cousins shifted uncomfortably. Robert muttered, "Good Lord." And Dad, pale, clutched the armrest of his chair, eyes narrowing at me. I rose before the poison could spread deeper. My palms pressed flat on the table, steady. "That," I said, my voice carrying over the shocked whispers, "is a fabrication, a piece of audio engineered to mimic me, but it is not me. And I can prove it if you give me time." Linda tilted her head, feigning confusion. "Fabrication?" Her laughter was like glass breaking. "Oh, Sarah, always so defensive. This is your voice, clear as day." Karen interjected firmly. "We've all seen how technology can fake things. We should allow Sarah to present her evidence before judgment." The room wavered between outrage and silence. My father's gaze bore into me, torn between what he heard and what he knew of me. Bell adjusted his glasses, shifting uncomfortably as though the entire profession of law sat perched on his shoulder. "I swear before everyone here," I continued, my tone sharpened to steel, "the recording is doctored. I preserved the system logs when Linda first brought it to my office. I documented every second, time, place, witnesses. If you care about truth, give me until tomorrow to show you." The silence deepened. No clink of glass, no rustle of napkin. Only the crackle of the fireplace filled the void. Dad's lips parted, as if to speak, but no words came. His trembling fingers tapped the chair arm. For the first time, doubt shadowed his face. Linda's eyes burned into mine, furious at my interruption. But she didn't stop me. She only folded her arms, as though she could wait out my resolve. The atmosphere thickened until Karen leaned close, her whisper like a torch in the dark. "Tomorrow, we'll have the original." "Hold your ground tonight." I straightened, heart hammering, and let my eyes sweep across the table, over cousins whispering, over David's evasive gaze, over my father's troubled silence. The night was not won, but neither was I defeated. Linda had fired her shot, but I was still standing. Tomorrow, the proof would speak for me. New Year's afternoon brought a hard blue sky and the kind of light that makes every edge look truer than it feels. The living room was full before I arrived. Coats on the banister, boots by the mat, voices layered in that careful, brittle cheer families use when they're waiting on a reckoning. The spruce still wore its glass deer. A strand of lights blinked lazily in the window. Bell stood near the mantel with his briefcase. Karen hovered beside him like a steadying hand. David paced a thin track in the rug. Linda, immaculate in winter white, had stationed herself at the end of the sofa, one palm resting on its arm as if it were a lectern. Dad sat in his wingback, blanket across his legs, eyes tired but awake. I set my tote on the coffee table and made myself breathe. "You asked for proof," I said, soft but carrying. "I brought it." Linda's smile showed every tooth. "By all means." I began with the clock. I pulled out a thin folder and laid it open. Printed screenshots, hash values, stills from the clinic hallway camera. 2 days ago, Linda delivered a USB to my office, I said. "The audio you heard on Christmas was engineered. Here are the system logs of when the device mounted, the one-play execution, the auto-deletion event. Here are photographs of the USB on my keyboard, with the office clock, and a witness initialing the time. This is the recording of the session itself, the only file that didn't erase. Bell has a copy." Bell stepped forward, took the envelope I offered, and nodded once as he scanned the first page. "Chain of custody appears intact," he said. "Timestamps match what I received electronically." I plugged my own laptop into a small speaker, set the volume, and pressed play. Not on Linda's fiction, but on the clip I had captured the next morning, outside the cafe, where she thought the world couldn't hear. Her voice came through clean and unvarnished, laughing, bragging, fitting my name into sentences like a weapon. "She'll flail, but it won't matter," Linda's voice said. "By the time anyone checks, the fund will be consolidated. One signature, mine, and the land is tidy." A sound moved through the room that wasn't speech, more like fabric tearing. Someone swore under their breath. Mom's hand went to her mouth. David stopped pacing. Linda didn't move. Only her fingers tightened where they rested, the knuckles blanching. I stopped the clip and let the room hold it. "That," I said, "is not AI." Karen nodded toward my tote. "Show them the rest." I drew out the second folder. "Dad kept originals," I said, throat tight. "Not in the safe. On him." I thought of Earl's garage, the smell of grease and coffee, his gentle teasing about a wallet held together by hope. Before Christmas, the wallet was moved to Linda's drawer. Yesterday, while she was at the store, Karen and I retrieved a document, hidden under the lining. It's a draft, a property transfer agreement he never signed. I held it up so they could see his handwriting on the margins, neat lines, questions, a circled not ready. It matches references in his ledger from the loft. Same phrasing, same hesitation. Bell took the sheet and compared it to a copy from his case file. "The language tracks with Michael's old templates," he said quietly. "This is his hand, and unsigned." I laid the ledger pages next, the cedar smell drifting up faintly like a benediction. On top, the page I had folded and unfolded a dozen times. "Do not let Linda touch the land fund." The room read it as one body leaning forward. Linda found her voice. "This proves nothing," she said, brittle. "Old notes. Sentiment. Michael has chosen a simpler path." Bell kept his tone even. "Michael also executed a codicil last year. He unzipped his case and removed a clear sleeve. It is properly witnessed and notarized. It requires 2 signatures, both children, for any parcel transfer and prohibits moving the family fund without their written consent or a court-appointed fiduciary." He looked at Dad. "Michael, I confirmed in our last meeting that this was your intent." Dad's gaze moved from Bell to me to Linda as if the three of us formed a triangle he had to draw a line across. I didn't want fighting, he said, voice grainy with fatigue. We don't need to fight, I answered, stepping closer to his chair, careful not to crowd him. We just need to obey you on paper. You protected us when you were strong. We keep those protections now. David came to stand beside me. For the first time in months, he looked like my brother again. Uncertain, yes, but rooted. Dad, he said, low. It's right. Linda's composure slipped a fraction. Michael, she began, but Belle lifted a hand. Given the codicil and the evidence presented, Belle said, projecting enough to fill the room, I will not advise any power of attorney that overrides these safeguards. Any attempt to move the fund unilaterally will trigger legal remedies. If there are concerns about misrepresentation to third parties, we can file notice. Silence fell in a clean sheet. The glass deer on the tree caught a shard of sun and threw it across the rug. Linda's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes darted to the laptop, then to the papers as if she could locate an exit inside the text. This is a smear, she said finally, but the conviction drained as she spoke. She stopped. Something in her recognized the shape of a wall. David turned to her. No more, he said, and there was no heat in it, only a flat finality that made me swallow. He moved half a step closer to me. The track he'd worn in the rug ended at my shoulder. I looked back at Dad. The lines in his face seemed to zag all at once. Not with defeat, but with release, like a hand unclenching after holding a hammer too long. His gaze found mine, and what I saw there made my throat sting. I'm sorry, he whispered, the two words striking truer than any gavel. His chest hitched once, his eyes shone. I'm sorry, kiddo. The room didn't breathe. Even the blinking lights paused, or maybe my eyes did. I went to my knees so we were level and took his hand, cool and steady, in mine. Behind us, Karen exhaled softly, a prayer too small for language. Belle slid the codicil back into its sleeve and snapped his case shut with a sound like a period. New Year's light spilled across the floor, pale and merciless, and for the first time it felt like a beginning. Dawn came pale and honest, the kind of light that doesn't gild anything so much as show it for what it is. My little kitchen smelled like coffee and toast. The furnace clicked and sighed. The fields beyond the window held a skim of frost that looked like sugar spilled from a careful hand. I set 4 mugs on the table and lined up what we had learned like I was laying out instruments before a procedure. The will, the codicil, the unfinished contract from the torn wallet, the USB logs sealed in a manila envelope. Will? Contract? USB. 3 points that made a straight line through the last month of our lives. Karen arrived first, hair tucked into a knit cap, quiet in the way of people who have already said the loud part, somewhere else. David came next, shoulders squared, eyes clearer than they'd been in years. He brought Dad, slow on the steps, breath a little thin, but present. I had piled quilts on the couch. We settled him there, propped with pillows, the morning light painting a soft bar across his knees. No one spoke for a minute. The house felt tender, like skin after a stitch is pulled tight. I sat on the coffee table facing my father so we were eye level, and I set the codicil, his codicil, on the tray beside the mugs. Dad, I said gently, we don't have to go over it all again. I just want to be sure you know where things stand. He nodded, slow. The tremor in his hand was smaller today. I know, he said. His voice had that morning rasp I remembered from childhood breakfast when he'd sit with the farm ledger and a black coffee before anyone else woke up. I made a mess trying to keep peace. You tried to keep the roof on, Karen said, not unkindly. That's different from a mess. David cleared his throat. Linda left, he said, looking at his hands. Packed a bag last night. I drove her into town. She said she'd call Belle about her mail. He swallowed. She didn't say goodbye. We let the fact find its place among the others. I didn't feel triumph, only a steadiness, like a boat finally drifting into slack water after fighting the current too long. Dad's eyes went to the envelope marked USB. He grimaced. "That thing made me hear you wrong," he said, shame and anger braided tight. "I knew your voice and still—" He shook his head once. "I'm sorry." "I know," I said. I reached for his hand and held it, warm now from the quilts. "You apologized yesterday. You don't have to keep paying for the same debt." His fingers squeezed mine, small but sure. "We walked through the next steps the way you read directions aloud while you assemble a complicated shelf. I would file Bell's notice of the codicil with the county clerk. The bank would receive a copy and note the 2-signature requirement on any changes to the fund. David and I would be named co-managers, co-agents for practical matters, with a written rule that any transfer required both of us in ink. No more single keys, no more single stories. David nodded along, then looked up. "And the land?" he asked, careful. "We don't sell," I said. "Not this year, not next, not unless we both agree. And it serves the family, not the noise." He exhaled. Some tightness left his face. Karen poured coffee. "You two will argue," she said, matter of fact, sliding a mug toward each of us. "That's normal. But you'll argue on paper and in daylight. That's the difference." Dad smiled at that. "Small, but real. On paper and in daylight," he echoed. "I like that." We signed what needed signing in Bell's absence, acknowledgments for him to notarize, simple authorizations that didn't touch the guardrails. I watched the pen travel from my hand to David's, then to my father's for the lines that were his alone. The movement felt ritual, not like surrender, but like a vow. When it was done, the house grew quiet again. I could hear the world going about its business beyond the glass. A truck downshifting on the county road, a crow casting commentary from the cottonwood. I stood and gathered the papers into a stack. Then I fetched the small maple box from my bedroom, the one Dad had made me at 17, dovetail joints so clean the corners still looked like they'd been drawn with a ruler. I lined the documents in the box, codicil on top, then the will, then the unsigned contract in a clear sleeve, then the chain of custody packet. I placed a note I had written on thinner paper above them, 2 signatures, no exceptions. It felt like tying a ribbon on a wound that would scar, but not split again. Before I closed the lid, I looked at Dad. "I have something to say," I told him, the words assembling themselves from a place deeper than temper. "I forgive you for doubting me. I forgive the parts of you that wanted quiet more than clarity. But there are conditions, and I'm saying them out loud so we remember. We do nothing behind closed doors anymore. If you're asked to sign, I'm there. If David is asked to sign, I'm there. If either of us can't be there, the answer is no until we are. That's my line." He didn't flinch. He didn't defend himself. He let the sentence land and nodded like a craftsman inspecting level. "That's fair," he said. "That's right." David looked relieved, almost boyish. "It helps to have rules," he said with a weak grin. "I'm better with fences than with fog." "Good," I said, and felt my mouth curve. "Then we'll build fences." We sat like that for a while, not speaking much. The 3 of us around the coffee table like campers around a small fire. Karen washed our mugs at the sink without being asked, humming something tuneless and warm. The sun climbed a finger's breadth, turned the frost to glitter, then to water. The fields darkened back to dirt where the day touched them. At last, I stood, slid the stack into the maple box, and carried it down the hall to my room. The bottom drawer of my dresser sticks a little before it yields. It did today too, and somehow the resistance felt like consent. I set the box inside, laid the spare key on a ribbon hook under the shelf, and closed the drawer. The click was soft, final. I turned the key and felt the faintest answering hum in my chest, like a tone you only notice when silence is perfect. Back in the living room, Dad had dozed with his head tipped back, mouth a little open. David was scrolling his phone, thumbs idle, eyes far off in a place that looked like the future. Karen dried her hands and set the dish towel straight. "Peace?" she asked me under her breath. "Peace," I said. I poured more coffee just because I could and let the house be ordinary. A heater running, a father breathing, paper lying still where it belonged. The drawer was locked. The papers were at rest. And for the first time in a long time, so was I. I placed the stack of papers back into the drawer, turning the key as if closing a heavy chapter of my life. Peace only comes when we have the courage to set clear boundaries. I realized that being filial does not mean blind obedience. Loving our parents must go hand in hand with maintaining our own legal and financial independence to protect ourselves. Evidence, contracts, deeds, everything proved to me that justice may arrive late, but it still arrives, and it endures only when built on clarity and truth. Outside, the morning breeze carried the scent of freshly cooked rice, reminding me that a home is only truly warm when fairness lives within it. If this story touched you, please like, share, and leave a comment. Type 1 if you feel the same. Type 2 if you think something could be improved.